Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Not in a serious way. Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon, joined by the Ruckettes. Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abu-Hakka, Urban League CEO and President Gwen Grant, media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran, and lobbyist Woody Cozad with the Cozad Company. And we're happy to welcome the Ambassador Club members from Country Club Bank to our studios. Ruckettes and all the folks here at KCPT, hope you enjoy your visit. You're welcome. Give yourself a nice round of applause. Now, have fun, but cause no ruckuses. That's our job, and we're just about to begin to do it. Well, just as criminal justice experts were gathering in Kansas City for an urban crime summit, they were reading and hearing reports of yet another weekend disturbance on the plaza. Police say crowds of young people have been increasing in size, and in Saturday's melee, there were at least 6 fights occurring simultaneously. There were also reports of gun sightings and gunshots, but apparently no one was wounded. This problem is a recurring one, and no one has yet come up with a solution. Maybe, Yael, there is no solution.
Well, probably not to that very, very specific problem, but...
Oh, the gangs,
yeah,
mobs
yeah,
gathering
right.
on the plaza on weekends.
You know, people are gathering in public parks, so, you know, that kind of stuff has gone on for years. Remember breakdancing on the plaza 30 years ago, and they didn't want that stuff, so...
Well, people weren't shot when they were breakdancing.
Well, nobody was shot the other night either, Mike,
either,
okay? So, I mean, you know, we have this thing where we're scared of these problems, and it wasn't on the plaza, by the way. It was in Mill Creek Park. Mill Creek Park is not on the plaza. And as I wrote this morning in a column, we're going to have, you know, thousands of white people gathered, and, you know, they'll be packing heat as well, because, you know, this is America and we have to have our guns. So they'll be there, and they'll be in their little area looking at the nice art, and there will be a concern about, you know, what goes on here. But kind of tying it to this whole thing of, you know, how do we have safety in Kansas City? A lot of cities deal with this. I mean, Philadelphia's had problems with it. Chicago's had problems with it, you know, gangs of youth and all that kind of stuff. And it's always, I guess you always have to say, gangs of minority youth. So you do have those problems, but it's also like, well, okay, and how many of them turned into full-scale riots, which is what everybody's always concerned about? None. I mean, none of them has turned into full-scale riots where people are going out, breaking all the windows on the plaza, or, you know, pillaging the plaza or whatever. So it gets a lot of attention, and God bless the plaza because they get a lot of attention, and I'm glad they still do in 2013.
Well, the park may not be on the plaza, but plaza merchants are concerned about what's been going on, and the mayor is sufficiently concerned to say maybe a year-round curfew.
Well, no, I think the mayor said he's not.
He said he's looking at it.
He's looking at it, but he didn't seem
to be maybe a year-round
very
curfew.
favorable about a year-round curfew, because it really doesn't make sense to go to a year-round curfew for this particular problem. I mean, Yael is so right. This is a public space, so how are you going to say that some people can't be here and some can't? What law enforcement has to do is arrest the people who are breaking the law and allow everyone else to enjoy the amenities of the plaza. So, you know, they have to come up with strategies to deal with that.
It's Mill Creek Park.
Mill Creek Park and the plaza.
That's right. Thank you, Mike.
But, you know, but the concern...
I may be the only person here who's lived on the plaza close to Mill Creek Park for many, many years in my youth. At any rate, I think it's a terribly serious problem, and I am pleased as punch that the mayor and particularly the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Chris Koster, took the initiative. More summits, the better. Bring in Ray Kelly from New York. I don't agree with his policies. I think that they are racial profiling, and there's no doubt about it, and the Supreme Court agrees with those of us who hold that position.
No, not the Supreme Court.
Oh, I think the state Supreme Court. Well, whichever court it was the one that
You're
made
talking about stop, what you call stop and frisk, and what the officials call stop, question, and frisk.
It's a New York thing. We're not talking about that here. But I just think that talking about having a gun court was very productive. It's anything that moves this question forward toward small solutions, big solutions, I don't care which. But the fact of the matter is, if the plaza becomes perceived in the minds of people as dangerous, as a place where the police cannot figure, and I do have I do have a problem with Kansas City Police. I don't understand why they aren't a little more proactive with groups of people. You know, you cannot block the sidewalks. You can't walk down the middle of the street and cause traffic problems.
Right.
Arrest them then, or take
They
them in.
should do a better job of crowd
Initially.
control.
Agree with you, Glenn.
Absolutely, I agree with
Glen's
you
on
on
the
that.
right
And you
track.
want to be safe
Absolutely.
on wherever you go.
The mayor is complaining, saying that children, teenagers, young people don't have anything to do.
Well-
Is it the city's responsibility to provide entertainment for young people?
Well, not per se, but look, if it's going to keep young people from creating the perception that Mary's talking about, and that's to me the valid point about what goes on the plaza or even in Mill Creek Park, is are you going to make it a place people don't want to go and spend money, that suburbanites don't want to go and spend money? If you do that, then there goes the plaza, and it's made the crown jewel of the city. You can't have that. Apparently, we weren't having this problem as much when we were having this mayor's hoops program and everything. Now, I'm generally not a guy
The
who's in favor of
dancing,
that.
Woody, the dancing.
Okay, but I'm not generally not in favor of them doing that. But if it works, I'm in favor of it.
Well,
And
I think
apparently
they
it
had
worked.
some problems at those as well. There were
Did
some
they?
fights and some
Well, I think whenever
difficulties.
you
Yeah,
have
but
a
it's
lot
not
of
clearing
people
the
together
plaza
like
out of
that, you might
customers.
have a little.
Well,
you know,
I have a lot of trust in the
altercations,
new mayor. I think that he has been proactive. I think he's done some real things that made real difference during the summertime, and I trust that he will.
but We need more activities, and
that has
parents
nothing to
need
do
to
with
do a
our
better
murder
job
problem, which is a
parenting.
different
Well, no, it
issue.
doesn't. I don't
Need
think.
more activities for adults. We got to move on. It is impossible to resist talking about this next issue because of the second word in the first sentence of the Kansas City Star story, ruckus. At Legoland, altercations with police and other contrary acts led to a unified government commissioner being censured. Prior to the well-publicized Legoland misadventure, Terrence Maddox faced charges of assault and resisting arrest, and there are other incidents suggesting Maddox has tried to use his office to avoid paying a traffic ticket and to intimidate and threaten. Now, what have his fellow commissioners of the unified government done about this? Well, not much, apparently nothing. The Ethics Commission, that's a separate entity, has censured Maddox, telling him to attend an ethics class. Mary, do you think this punishment is way too severe?
Well, I think that you need to describe it to our audience better, is what I think. First of all, the ethics process in Kansas City, Kansas, is wonderfully well structured. I worked for several years in the Iowa legislature putting together its ethics procedures, and I'll tell you, this is a good one. The Ethics Commission in KCK, or the Unified Government, is entirely and completely separate from the elected officials. That's the way they set it up in 1997. You probably remember that. In order to make sure that the people of the city and the county could really trust the decisions and that public officials were kept an eye on. So we come around with our friend, Mr. Maddox. And this is not a criminal. You have to make a distinction between the criminal acts of a public official and non-ethical acts. And in this case, they had complaints, they met. By the way, the Ethics Commission is appointed by the county attorney, the chief judge of the district court, and the auditor of the legislature. Well,
you may have missed my point in the introduction. Apparently, weren't listening carefully enough. I pointed out that the Ethics Commission was a separate entity. My concern is that the commissioners ought to have come forward independently and criticized their fellow commissioner for these actions. And the mayor should have come forward and issued a statement. Can you believe Carol Marinovich not doing that?
When the mayor said, I accept public censure, Mike, just a minute.
He accepts it.
Just listen to me for a minute. They have never had a public censure case in the city or county of Wyandotte.
Well,
this
and
is
the point is the penalty is going to an ethics class. Should there be a greater penalty?
There should be, but I mean there isn't. Okay, but we'll start with that. But it's very disappointing to see. I mean, you can watch the Legoland footage and go, this guy's got anger issues.
It was running, I think, when we began the
you got anger issues. Okay, fine. But some of the other stuff, which is basically abusing his power as an elected official.
Yes.
That's where I think Mark Holland and all the other county commissioners, heck, they could have taken a vote and said, 7-0, we censure you. I mean, if you're really looking for something that is peer-to-peer, They could have done
You
that.
know what? It should go beyond that. I mean, I call him terrorizing Terrence. He's just running amok with all of his shenanigans. And basically, what is the recall policy there? I think he's a poster child for recall because the electorate should sanction his behind.
And guess
they
what?
should recall this
Gwen,
man.
he's
He's
gonna be in
crazy.
trouble
But
with
the
the law.
commissioners
And-
can't do that. That would
Well,
require action by the
but
electorate.
the ultimate punishment
Yeah.
is the electorate say, you are not the representative
But Mike
that
was
is
implying
best.
in his question that the Ethics Commission didn't go far enough. This is as
Well,
far
but
as
all they can do
go.
is censure. After
That's
they
right.
censure, he goes to the
That's
class
right.
and then so what?
And trust me, his other actions will be investigated. This guy's going to be in trouble with the law.
This is why they have elections, and if they have
That's right.
recall procedures, this is why they have recall.
They have
The
recall.
ethics class, of course, is risible. We have them for lawyers. I know. I have to take this every 3 hours.
Is that a joke?
Yes, it is. It is a joke. It's intended to be a joke. It's such a joke that the federal court stopped ordering lawyers to do this stuff anymore. And so you send them an ethics. That's a laugh. You know, the old line, beauty is only skin deep, it's stupid's to the bone. And you're not going to cure this kind of stuff.
Well,
that you
this
saw
guy
on the
was running
screen,
around with a tag
an
on
ethics
his
class.
license plate, Woody, and he was also implying to people
implying
that
that he has gang
could make use of the
connections, make you
legal department
disappear.
in the unified
I mean,
government to threaten drivers that he bumped into and so on. He's going to be in trouble with the law. But that's not the ethics process.
No,
think you'll get
the
real.
process may
What
be
does this
fine.
do to the improving, at least heretofore, image of Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County, where this kind of problem was more commonplace years gone by?
It was, and certainly there have been improvements from 15, 20 years ago under Marinovich and Holland and all the other different people who have served there under unified government. But you have him running around doing this. They can't replace Mark Holland because there's a divide, which I think is the real story here.
Yeah.
The divide on this commission does not look good for the future.
All right. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon is getting praise from fellow Democrats for proving that the GOP-controlled state legislature is not as veto-proof as first thought. Although many of Nixon's vetoes were overridden, the two most prominent ones were not. Upheld were his veto of a tax cut measure and of a bill referred to as the Second Amendment Preservation Act. After the veto session, Republican leaders vowed to win the battles next time, and some Democrats and Republicans were suddenly looking at Jay Nixon and seeing a national political profile. Might we have another potential Vice President or President Nixon, Woody?
Well, we'll hope not. First of all, and he won the big one. The gun bill, the NRA didn't even support.
Yeah.
The big one was the tax one. He
The
won that one.
publicized ones.
Yeah, he won. Actually, the educational lobby won that. And the people of Missouri wanted that tax cut by 64%. So politically, I think he's made it clear he's not planning on running for the Senate against Blunt. Because he wouldn't have staked everything on something that vetoing something 64% of people want. Whether he gets on a national ticket is a function of, first and foremost, of one question: can he bring Missouri into the Democratic column? If they believe the answer to that is yes, he's a candidate to be the VP. If they believe the answer to that is maybe, then he's not a candidate. And this 64% thing he just done is not a plus for him in that regard. On the question, which I think you also raised when you emailed us, what are they going to do about this tax bill? They don't know yet. They're sitting strategizing. The Republicans. But I think that if somebody asked me, which they have not, my recommendation would be take the same tax bill, strip out the tax on prescription drugs and the 3-year look-back feature, which had a big price tag on it, and take the same tax bill and the first 2 weeks of the session pass it. He has only a few days to veto send it back, and right before the filing deadline for their opposing candidates, they get to vote on another override of something 64% of people.
Gwen, what about Nixon's national political profile now? Does he have one?
Well, I think maybe he has one. I kind of agree with Woody. I don't know that his profile is great enough to land him on a ticket.
Let me ask you this. If Republicans do prevail in the next session and the tax cut measure is approved and his veto is overridden, wouldn't that negate any success, any improvement in his image?
How many ifs did you have in there?
Those two.
I kind of agree with
I just
Gwen,
don't think
but-
Nixon's
Well,
profile.
I want to hear what Gwen was saying
I don't
here.
think Nixon's profile profile is presidential ticket profile. I really don't. And I think that the way he's conducted himself as governor really, at sometimes showing up where I wasn't sure if he was Democrat or Republican, doesn't really tie him very strongly to the national Democratic ticket. But we have some time. Everything changes, with time in the political environment. So we have to see.
Well, I don't care if 94% of the Missourians wanted it was the wrong bill, Woody. And so the rejection of it was good.
We disagree. I think it was a great bill.
Well, well, you just said it could be improved by taking out 3 onerous things, or at least 2 onerous things. So right there, it was not that great of a bill. And we will know in another year or so, we'll have at least a better idea of what's happening in Kansas, which is, of course, part of the model, not the whole model, but part of the model for the Missouri tax cut. Hey, we've got to follow Kansas because, look, they're cutting taxes. And we do know there is some positive side to cutting taxes. Maybe a firm or 2 might move there. Maybe some people have more money to spend on Mac burgers and all that kind of stuff. But the big thing is, what does it do to your state and the services it offers? And if these Republican legislators next year decide, well, we can go ahead and cut some of the revenue because we can prove that eventually we'll have more revenue, and that's where Kansas comes in, then I think we'll have a better chance of passing and sustaining the veto. And real quickly on Nixon, you're absolutely right. He's a Republican-crat or something like that, where you can't really tell what he is. He has absolutely no national possibility.
Jay Nixon is the most successful Democrat in the state of Missouri for a very long time, with the possible exception of Claire McCaskill. The 2 of them. And you don't think that Hillary Clinton, the sound of Clinton Nixon doesn't have a certain ring to it? Plus,
yes, it does.
There you go.
I'd hang up on that ring, I tell you.
Mark my words. Look, Missouri has a habit of producing vice presidential candidates, and several of them have gone on to be great presidents. I admire greatly what Jay Nixon just did.
Yeah.
He stood up to the corporate interests at a time when it's not very popular in some quarters to stand up. And what did he stand up for? He stood up for the people in this state that are having a tough time getting through the worst economic depression we've had. We don't fund our schools in Missouri. We don't fix our roads, and the whole list is a long one.
He had 10 vetoes overridden. Only 8 have been overridden in the last 100 years.
This was not that great. With a lot of skill.
In the introduction to the program, I always say we talk about the news of the day and the trends of the times. Well, one trend of the times seems to be the growing acceptance of tattoos, especially on young women. Getting the most ink on this subject recently is Miss Kansas, Teresa Vale, who became the first contestant to reveal her tattoos during the Miss America pageant. The tattoos were hardly risque. One is the Serenity Prayer on her side, and the other is the insignia of the Army Dental Corps on her shoulder. Yes, Miss Kansas is also in the Army National Guard and a student at K-State. About her decision to display the tattoos, she says it's to empower women to overcome stereotypes and break barriers. Do you think her Miss America appearance, even though she didn't win, has helped do that? Gwen?
Yes, I think it was great. I think you have to keep in mind how she even got there. She was the people's choice. And because she
meaning
talked about,
of all the 50-some women,
right,
people voted online,
and
she was
she was the people's choice.
Okay.
She got the most
got to be in the finals,
online
the final
votes
15.
to get her into the top 15.
Right.
And then with her own talent after getting there, she got to the top 10. But I think it's important to note that it was because of her, I think, the tattoos and her willingness to say, I'm going to go out here and talk about this. I'm going to show my tats on TV, which is really cool, and they were beautiful. I think tats are cool. So I'm in that group of folks that say, yeah, bring them on. So, I thought that she did make a very strong statement because the tattoo, the Serenity Prayer, the reasoning behind the tattoo, which is, I think, a lot of understanding, brings a lot of understanding.
Said she had been bullied as a child, right?
She had been bullied as a child, and then so this gave her strength and encouragement. And then the one about on her arm, about the dental, her service in the Army and her dad being in that. service as well. So I think when we look at the Miss America pageant, it's evolving, and it's becoming more attractive to young women who are progressive. It's not just a beauty pageant. If you look at these women, they are trying to pursue and further their education and be engaged in all types of careers. So I thought she did a great job.
Well, I think tattoos are absolutely stupid. I think they degrade the human body in many ways, but if somebody wants to do it, it is their body and they can do it, and I'm sure she had reasons for doing it. And many of the basketball players and the young people I know who do it for a number of reasons. But I personally think they're going to regret that decision when they're older in many ways. And I do think it is a part of the whole thing, and I'm probably even including some of my generation, which is look at me. Look what I've done. It's part of a exhibitionist to a degree. And as you said, Gwen, some of it's positive exhibition.
Many people have tattoos that you never see.
Yeah.
That's
so
true.
It's really not about exhibitionism. I think it's about...
People have been decorating their bodies
I
since
understand. I'm telling you what my personal
BC.
feelings are.
I think decorating bodies is as old as humanity. As for Miss Kansas, she was just delightful, charming, fun, and smart, and, because that blue-collar, I can do anything kid. But one thing, Miss Kansas, when you thought you were going to sing, Puccini's marvelous Nessun Dorma aria.
Let me add, she said...
It just made me cringe.
She said my talent was archery.
They don't allow projectiles on the
Yes.
Well, let me ask you, why
projectiles
couldn't
were
she do her
outlawed.
archery? She should have been allowed to do her archery.
That's something to fight for.
Well, there was a baton twirler who was throwing things in the air.
I mean, the thing that's really caught the nation's attention about this whole Miss America pageant is who won.
Yeah.
Yes.
The first Indian American, and what an astounding woman she is. But there was such awful racist
I'm
feedback
talk about that.
And
Absolutely.
terribly nasty racist
What was the racist
stuff.
feedback
someone
quickly?
tweeted that Miss America should be for Americans. As if this woman is not an American. And so the xenophobic, racist response, totally
inappropriate. And the Fox
inappropriate.
News guy said that our Kansas woman represented American values.
I mean,
as opposed to Nina
some of your
Davuluri,
friends over there on Fox
somehow wasn't American.
Huh?
Some of your friends over there
No,
on
it wasn't
Fox.
a friend of mine on Fox. It was on the Fox radio
Oh.
service, which is not the same as the Fox TV news channel, where my friends are.
Oh, that's where your friends are. Okay. I'll get it right.
I want
the next
Megan
time.
Riley to be my new friend.
There you go.
Well, she's breaking down stereotypes, and she's for world peace, and thank you,
Now,
Gracie.
what more can you want? And she wants to have a career where she helps children.
Yeah.
Well, I hope
All right, now it is time for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes celebrate or eviscerate people and events in the news, and we start tonight with Mary.
Well, I want to celebrate the possibility that if President Obama gives his okay, there will be a magnificent woman by the name of Janet Yellen who will become the next chairman of the United States Federal Reserve. Very possible. We don't know what he's going to do. He'll probably do it in the next day or two. And why do I support her? Well, she has a magnificent record, among other things. She's brilliant. The Wall Street Journal says she has a record of forecasting where the economy is going. Joseph Stiglitz, the great Nobel Prize-winning economist, said she is an economist of great intellect. She brings to bear not just an understanding of financial markets and monetary policy, but labor markets in a time of unemployment. She's got gravitas, and the president ought to say yes to Janet Yellen.
Well, in the last few weeks, I have kind of angered the blue bloods at the Hall Family Foundation, the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City, and various other large corporations that I probably will never work for. So let me today say a salute and a toast to the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce for their Big Five program. Not all these initiatives have succeeded as well as they had once hoped, but they do focus the civic community on improving not just the urban core, but the Kansas City area economy. It's very important to do and very important to continue.
The bodies were still warm at the Navy Yard when the President of the United States chose to go ahead with his speech. He gave a respectful nod to the terrible tragedy that had just happened and then proceeded to his usual business of a vicious trashing of Republicans. It was a tasteless exhibition, in the course of which he said, well, there are some Republicans who are decent people. indeed, Mr. President, there are some Republicans who are decent people. There are some Democrats who are decent people. And it's a shame you didn't choose to be one of them on that day.
I'm going to roast the people who tweeted that Miss America should be born in America, and birthers, and all people who think that anyone who, other than, well, let me make it real clear. The only people who are native in this country are Native Americans. America is a country of immigrants. We all came here from somewhere else. And Indian American, African American, Irish American, Italian American, we all have a right to share in what this country has to offer.
And finally, 3 major dictionaries have added a second usage to the definition of literal or literally. It still means free from exaggeration, but it can also mean the exact opposite. The Oxford Dictionary says the second use has become very common for added effect, as in, we literally laughed ourselves to death. News accounts suggest Vice President Joe Biden is literally responsible.
I mean, literally. And literally, not figuratively, literally putting America's security at risk. Literally. In a literal sense. Literally. Literally. It's literally incredible.
And we are literally out of time for Ruckus. Back next Thursday at 8 p.m. following Enrollment Day at KCPT Healthcare. That's a big event. Now, on behalf of the Ruckettes and the Ruckus crew, Mike Shannon, thanks for watching. Thanks to all of you for being with us in the studio, and good night.